This is right here in the Del Paso Heights. Nephew, just listen. No, you got to stay right here. You can't. Hey, why you doing him like that? Wait, Alexis. Hey, Alexis, wait.
I'm going right here, Naomi. Get out.
Oh my God.
You can't be hitting me.
Hey, why you beating him like that? Oh my God. Oh my God. He beat him like that. Oh, Jesus. I've seen this, Lord. Oh, yeah, he's breaking his arm. Oh my God, why'd you take him down like that?
Plausibly live from the Podcast 99 studios, located in beautiful downtown Manteca, California, this is the Dave Bowman Show. Now, here is your host, the submarine qualified, coffee-swilling, stuffy elitist history buff, Dave Bowman.
Hey, welcome aboard, cheese lovers. It is me, Dave. You want to join me? 565-DAVE, 565-3283, telephone and voicemail. You can email me, dave@thedavebowmanshow.com. And, of course, we're on the web. Just look for The Dave Bowman Show. A loqui conitio, stand up, tell those who oppose liberty, don't tread on me. So, if you were to watch the news today or pick up a newspaper or go on social media, if that's where you get your news from, and many Americans do, the number one story in the world right now, and I say that based on tweets from around the world, not just the United States, is, of course, the hashtag United Airlines incident in which a pulmonary doctor was, by now, you've seen it, yanked off an airplane against his will and with great malice and forethought, I guess, and they beat him up pretty good from what I can see. And of course, this has become the lightning rod of controversy of today with regards to whether or not somebody should be, executed for this. No, I'm kidding. They're probably not talking execution. Somebody's getting fired. But who's really at fault? Is it the airlines? Is it the police? Is it, who is it the man? The character assassination that he's gone through in the last 48 hours has been incredible. They've dug up everything on him that they can possibly dig up on it. And you almost wonder why. What rationale could there be for this? Concurrent with that, however, were a couple of other stories that have kind of noodled their way through my mind as far more important. The reason I think they're far more important is because United is going to settle out of court. They cannot let this go to court. They will settle out of court for a significant amount of money, way more than I'll ever make in my lifetime, way more than that doctor would ever make in his lifetime. And I suspect that so will the police department. Be that as it may, it's still something that we're talking about because there's a cultural thing here. And I think there's at least one other story that kind of shows that same question that I've had about our culture over the last, 10, 12 years. It seems like it's really been building, maybe even since 9/11. In Sacramento over the weekend, and maybe you've seen this video, maybe you haven't, a man was arrested by a police officer. The arrest was extremely violent. The video, of course, shows the man walking on the side. The police officer gets into a confrontation with him, and eventually the police officer is heard saying, "Follow my commands or I will take you down." The man ends up being taken down and beaten quite extensively by the police officer. Now again, the video lacks context. We don't know. It's like the video of the man being dragged off the plane. We don't know everything that happened here. If all you saw was that video with no contextual background, with no interest facts, none of it, you will come to a conclusion. And that conclusion may be, in the first case, the man was a security risk and he was dragged off the plane. In the second case, you may conclude that the man failed to obey the officer's commands and was a threat of some kind. The reality, however, of both stories is that in the first case, the man on the airplane was no threat at all. And in fact, more videos have come out subsequent to that, which are very clear that the man was not a threat, and that he was not happy about being removed from the airplane. He warned them, if you do this, you're going to get sued. They did it anyway. There's an argument to be made there about, whether judgment was used or not, and we'll certainly get into that. In the case of Sacramento, however, the telling fact that we're missing from the video is that the man who was arrested, beaten and arrested, was almost immediately released from jail after being arrested. The release cited a lack of evidence of anything being done wrong. In other words, even the local police department there recognized very quickly the fact that the man had committed no crime, and their officer, who was a 2-year veteran of the force, probably acted inappropriately in arresting him. Both of these events have called to mind. Now, I know here in Sacramento, the Black Lives Matter element is going to enter into this because the man was African American. As far as the man on the plane goes, I don't think you're going to see a racial component specifically involved in that. However, you are going to see a lot of questions about what the hell is going on here. And that's where I'm leaning. Now, I've had a theory for several years. We've talked about it off and on. And I go back to 1773 here in the United States, what was then the colonies. We had a situation, particularly in Boston, where the spark of revolution had begun. It ended up with the Boston Massacre. You have a lot of meetings. You've got people yelling at the governor. You've got resistance to paying the tax. You have a lot of overt acts of resistance. And the British solution, the Crown's solution, was to quarter troops in Boston. They put troops in people's homes. They put troops in people's places and businesses and the like. And we hear that today, and we immediately go to the Third Amendment. No troops shall be quartered except in time of war or with permission and so forth, and the proper legislation, so forth and so on. The Third Amendment, of course, is the least of all of the amendments adjudicated. In fact, I don't think there's a single case that is based solely on the Third Amendment, although there should be. We talk a lot in my world about originalism and what did it mean? What was the purpose of these things? And the reality is that in the 1770s, there was no civilian police force, not as we understand it today. That didn't come around until the mid-1800s in England and later here in the United States. Yes, you had sheriffs. You had county sheriffs who deputized posses and that sort of thing later, particularly in the West. But a police force didn't exist the way we think of it today. The police were the redcoats. The police were the army. They were put there specifically to maintain order. They would not have, the phrase protect and serve would never have occurred to them. Their job was to maintain order, and they didn't really care who was out of line. They would crack heads and smack people upside the head who were not maintaining order. And as we saw later on in what would be called the Boston Massacre, sometimes things got out of hand, just like they do today. The difference was, of course, John Adams standing up to defend the soldiers, saying, look, they didn't start it. And in doing so, I think in a lot of ways changing the course of history. The existence, though, of a police force implies certain things. Number one, and this is imperative to remember. By the way, before I start all that, this caveat, this is not criticism of your favorite police officer. It's not. I know some of you will take it as it, and some of you will go with Dave's anti-cop. No, I'm not. But there are certain things that we need to keep in mind here, and there are certain things that we need to understand about what we're doing. Number one, police is government. The police force, I don't care what level you're talking at, is the power of government. It is the force of government. It is enforcing government's will, government's laws, government's practices and policies. That's what a police force does. Now, we put a nice label on it, to protect and serve, but what does that actually mean? And my guess is that if you just randomly picked 100 police officers and asked them what does to protect and serve mean, you might get a wild variance in answers. The question that we're left with is, what does that mean? To protect and to serve whom? It's an important question. Now, in your head, if you're a cop, you're going, come on, Dave, that's obvious. It means the public. Okay. Does it? Does it always mean the public? And how do you define the public? Now, I realize these are strange questions, and some of you are already going, I'm not going to listen to any more of this crap. This guy's just anti-cop. But stay with me here. The purpose of placing redcoats in your home was to change your behavior, to control your behavior, to maintain what the government had decided was acceptable behavior. Now jump ahead 229, 30, 250 years and ask yourself, as you watch the police force as it is used today, what is it doing? Now, of course, you think that's a strange question, but what have we seen in the last couple of days? And, I could sit here with a newspaper and a web search, and we could go through examples over the past year, over the past 10 years, 5 years, whatever. But let's just take these two examples. This arrest in Sacramento, where a man was arrested by a police officer violently and immediately released because, as the authorities there said, there was absolutely no evidence that he'd done anything wrong. Why does a police officer make that arrest? Now, we all know police officers. We all know cops. Do any of us know a cop who would say to us, yeah, I can't wait to knock somebody upside the head for disrespecting me on the street. I can't wait to just, handcuff him, tase him, beat him stiff. Nobody knows that cop. Nobody has ever met that cop. And if they did, they didn't say anything about it. We don't know any of that. I don't know any of those cops. I don't know a single police officer that would ever say that. Ever. And yet, it happens. We have a police officer who literally beats up a suspect on the street. Why? What was going through his head that says, I'm in control, you're going to do what I say, or else? And then turn around and have the police department say, what the hell are you doing? No, there's absolutely no evidence that this guy's done anything wrong. And oh, by the way, remember that there are multiple states, including California and Texas, that are toying with the idea of making such videoing illegal, right? Why? Because it would tend to be beneficial to the police. If there was no record, nothing that could be taken, nothing that could be shown that, hey, maybe perhaps this was overwhelming. Now, if it was just this case, you look at it and go, well, it's just one guy run amok. Maybe it's roid rage. Maybe it's PTSD. Who knows? But what if it's cultural? What if it's systemic? To a system that says to the police officers, to the police departments, to the policing system, not the individuals, not the cop that's your brother or sister or husband or wife or whatever, but to the system that says you serve the interests of the government. The protect and serve, which we all assume is the public, is really skewed towards the government side of things. What if? What if the purpose of the police department is essentially quartering and so modifying our behavior? Can't be that way, you say? What happens when you're driving 45 in a 50s in a 40 zone and there's a police officer up ahead of you? What do? You modify your behavior, right? That's not quite quartering, but if you were critical of government policies, pick the policy, I don't care what it is. You don't like Modesto Irrigation District, you don't like school, whatever. And there was a police officer in your home, sitting on your couch, listening to what you were saying, you might tend to be less descriptive of what you really think or really feel. We're not there yet, but we're getting to the point where policing is becoming redcoatish in nature. Now, to some degree, don't misunderstand me, to some degree that's fine. Deterrence relies on a physically intimidating presence. It really does. So if you think you're going to be in a place that has trouble, what do? You send in your biggest, burliest cops. So I remember a couple of years ago going to the rodeo in Oakdale, and apparently they have rules about vests and gang signs and likes of that, and there were a couple of motorcycle people who were upset about that, and they met one of Oakdale's biggest. God, that guy was huge. Man, he just stood there with his hands, kind of tucked into his vest and rocking on his heels and never said a word, and soon enough the motorcycle people decided that they didn't really want to mess with him, and they took off. They went the other way. That's a physically intimidating presence to protect the public. I get it. But there's this nebulous kind of line, isn't there, that gets crossed more often than we're willing to admit. That's what worries me. When to serve and protect becomes serve and protect what exactly? Whose constitutional rights are being served and protected? You can't convince me that this man arrested in Sacramento's constitutional rights were served and protected. You can't. I'm sorry. I've seen the video. I've seen the reports. I know the fact that they released him on the basis of no evidence to hold him. That would indicate to me that a police officer sworn to uphold is right there on the side of his car. Constitution, he's going to hold up and defend the Constitution, and right on the side of his car is to serve and protect, got confused about what exactly it was that he was serving and protecting. When I look at the airplane incident, you have a major corporation, United Airlines, which, look, we could sit here and go through all the mistakes United made. United screwed up big time, colossally. This was 100% United Airlines' fault. There was no two ways about it. I think I just said United Way. I didn't mean that. I meant United Airlines. This is 100% their fault. No two ways about it. No question about it. I don't think you'd find a jury in the world that would find otherwise. We could pick apart how they should have done it. We've all done that. You've all heard all that. Corporation calls a police department, a law enforcement arm of the government, to do what exactly? To protect and serve whom? Do you start to see the problem here? Man sitting in his seat, quietly. Look, I don't want to get off the plane. I'm not volunteering. United didn't up their offer. People got a little restless. And like something out of the Hunger Games, they just start calling numbers. Yep, you're done. You're it. You volunteer to be tribute. Only he didn't volunteer. Now, I have some serious questions about what the police knew going in there. This is where I want to start with the police officer? What did you know standing in front of this guy on an airplane? What were you told by United? Were you told the entirety of the story? That United overbooked the flight, wanted 4 seats for their employees to deadhead to Louisville. That this was entirely United's foul up, and it's United's problem. Were they told that? Or were they told something else? Were they left to imply things? Hey, we got this guy, we got to get off the plane, and he won't get off the plane. In either case, do the police officers you know and I know go in there with their nightsticks and head knocking and just drag a guy by his feet off the plane, or do they ask questions? Now, I know the cop that I know best, my brother, because I've seen him do it, asks questions, a lot of questions. He'll drive you nuts with how many questions he'll ask you. And I just feel like there should have been more of that. There should have been more people going, wait a minute, we're here to serve and protect. Who are we serving and protecting? Let's ask some questions. And when they don't ask those questions, you end up with a video of a guy being dragged by his feet off the airplane, bleeding from his head, and hurt. And in essence, costing United Airlines way more than it would ever have cost to charter another plane, a bus, rent a bunch of cars, get an Uber, whatever, to put these people on to take them to Louisville, Kentucky, which was all of 314 miles away. You know, do you realize that? 314 miles. Hell, I drove, on Saturday, I drove 800 miles. It can be done. I know it's not the most comfortable thing in the world, and maybe people, want to get it done, but if United can't keep its schedule straight and get people where they're supposed to be, isn't that United's problem? Who are the police serving and protecting? Whose constitutional rights, whose rights in general, whose public are they protecting? That's my question here. I don't know that the police knew everything. If I did know that, if I had an inkling that those police officers knew that the reason they were throwing 4 people off the airplane was because United screwed up, I would have a much, much more angry opinion of the police actions in this. But I don't know that. I suspect that they didn't know that, and I suspect they didn't ask a lot of questions, which is what concerns me. We're seeing more and more of this authoritarian serving and protecting the interests of government and or corporation. And in some ways you could argue that the airlines are quasi-governmental organizations. They're kind of quangos. They're so heavily, regulated and controlled, and security is so heavily regulated and controlled. It's hard to describe them as completely independent of the government. So really, when you get down to it, who's being served and protected here? As this guy's face is getting ground into the asphalt in Sacramento, and as this guy's getting banged against seats as he's dragged out in the airport plane. And again, we're seeing more and more of this kind of thing around the country. And it's just the question that I think we should be asking ourselves is, are police really thinking, or are they reacting to situations that they're being given to by quasi-government or government officials? That's the real question that we need to approach ourselves and ask ourselves with. And it's kind of where I'm at on this whole United thing and the Sacramento thing. 565-DAVE, 565-3283. What do you think about it? You can let me know. You can comment. And I realize some of you have already tuned out because Dave hates cops. Dave doesn't hate cops. What Dave wants is for police officers to realize that their oath, the same oath that they raise their hand to take, is to the Constitution of the state and the feds, not to the mayor, not to the airlines, not to the governor. It's not. It is to uphold and defend the Constitution, right? And if I, as a first-class petty officer of the United States Navy, can ask those questions, why can't a second-year officer on patrol ask those questions? Why aren't they? Don't tell me they are, because I see too many evidence that they're not. And that's where I fall off the wagon with this thing. That's what deeply concerns me, and it's what's causing me stress over these kinds of things. It's also why I don't fly, but that's another story. in and of itself. The other thing yesterday was Passover. So I kind of stayed off social media as much as I could. But even I could not avoid people wanting to talk to me about Sean Spicer and his comments about Bashar al-Assad, comparing him to Adolf Hitler. Look, I believe very firmly in Godwin's law, which is that as soon as you bring up Hitler in an argument, you lose automatically. Even if you're right, you lose because you had to go to that analogy. There are better ways to handle that. There are better ways to approach things, but this is where people go. And people have noted, well, Spicer compares Assad to Hitler. He gets pilloried by the press, the media, and whatever else. Other people, politicians, compare Trump to Hitler, and they're applauded for doing so. The problem lies in this whole Hitler scale, I guess. I have a solution to this whole problem. I really do. Whether you're talking about Major League Baseball owners, remember a few years Marge Schott, owner of the Cincinnati Reds, got in trouble for saying, well, Hitler made the trains run on time. She was wrong. That was Mussolini, but she said it and people got really mad and just assumed that she was a racist because she would dare say that. Hitler wasn't all bad. Historically speaking, I'm sure you could find people in the 1930s, 34, 35, 36, who were quite happy with Adolf Hitler. I have no doubt that you could find historical people that were thrilled with what he was doing. Overall, however, you would have to rate him overall point. So anyway, people keep bringing this up, and of course it's a career killer. As soon as you bring up Hitler wrong, Spicer, I don't know what's going to happen. And I don't know if the president's going to fire him. I don't know if he's going to quit. Frankly, I have a good friend who refers to him as, Trump's Baghdad Bob, because he seems to be, the alternative facts guy. Frankly, he'd probably be better off quitting, but that's, it's a no-win job. It really is. As we saw with the previous press secretaries, the other side is going to rip into everything. You got a guy speaking extemporaneously about what he thinks the president believes about a subject, and then you rip him to pieces when speaking extemporaneously, his head, says something wrong. It's a no-win job. I can't imagine anybody. The only person I can see in that job would be Chevy Chase. If you remember the movie Spies Like Us, where he's talking about the Paraguayans, the Paraguayan Air Force, he's the only guy that could probably handle that job. But be that as it may, Spicer's in trouble. So here's my solution to this, right? And it applies to everybody. But we got to get everybody to buy into it. And that is, let's just have a Hitler scale. Okay? So you got Adolf Hitler, who is obviously Adolf Hitler. Hitler gets a 100% Adolf Hitler rating. Okay? He's the baseline 100% Adolf Hitler. That's it. And then what you do is you compare, how many Hitlers Assad gets. Does he get 30 Hitlers? Does he get 35? Does he get 98? And so we have a degree of scale as to, okay, how much like Hitler really is Bashar al-Assad? Is he 65 Hitlers or just 12 Hitlers? Is he, he's using sarin gas on his own people, which, as it turns out, Adolf Hitler used Zyklon B on many of his own people. So is that comparable? Does that bump him up? Did he invade foreign countries? Did he, start a world war? All these things add up. See, and that way you just say, well, instead of saying Bashar al-Assad is worse than Hitler, you could say, well, he's, 98 Hitlers, or he's 106 Hitlers. And people have some scale of what you're measuring, see, and then you don't have to get into the specifics of why you think that. You just stand on that. What do you think? The Hitler scale work for you? 565 Dave, 565-3283. Why don't we just stop the comparisons to Hitler and just say Assad's a bad guy? I think we're all adults here. I think we can handle that. Right? Dave at thedavebowmanshow.com. Hey, I got to get going. Take the time right now. Tell the people that matter in your life you love them very much. You'd miss them if they weren't there, so don't pass up those opportunities. You don't want to have that regret. Plausibly Live, this is the Dave Bowman Show for the Podcast 99 Network.
The Dave Bowman Show is a Slippery Fish Entertainment production for the Podcast 99 Network. Copyright 2017. All rights reserved. For more information or to contact the show, log on to www.thedavebowmanshow.com.
Hey, I'm gonna go do something productive. I'm gonna go watch television.